So this week I learned that Elizabeth I made a law that meant you had to eat fish 3 days a week or you could go to jail. So in honour of fish days, I thought let's try and find a nice Tudor fish recipe. So this is a recipe from the time of Henry VIII called a fantastic crayfish or lobster tart. So I don't really know what to do with this tart because it tells you to put the batter between two crusts. At this point, pie pastry is more commonly called a coffin, and it has more in common with Tupperware than it has with pie crusts as you and I know them today. I'm not going to do that because I think if I'm making a sweet, spicy, herbaceous lobster custard tart, I at least want to be able to eat the pastry. Lay out some flour. There's this little artisanal. So apparently most of where this comes from is in 1588. The English were about to be invaded or under threat of invasion from the Spanish Armada. Now, at that point, only a small percentage of the navy actually belonged to the Queen. The rest were all ships manned by merchant fishermen, by Thames watermen and civilian mariners. However, the religious Reformation had really hurt the fishing trade that was so key for keeping the navy afloat because all these ships doubled up as the merchant navy. So the navy was being part funded by fish eating. So Elizabeth I's chief advisor, William Cecil, had this brainwave whereby if you got people to forcefully eat fish 3 days a week, then you could try and do your civic duty and keep the navy afloat.
Literally.
Damn it, why didn't I think of that? Lay this base in. The advantage of doing recipes where you know they're going to be trash from the start is that you don't need to really worry about being a perfectionist. I feel like we should put this in the oven for like a few minutes. Crayfish are actually oddly expensive right now. Apparently the less expensive thing to do is to buy a lobster. Already regretting all my life choices. I actually haven't done this before, this is quite exciting. So we now have lobster meat. So for this recipe we're going to take our crayfish or our lobster. Not sure really what herbs work best with lobster, currants and spices, but parsley, fish seems good. So we've got our herbs chopped all well together. Now we need to put them with almond milk.
What?
Almond milk has actually been really popular since the Middle Ages. The Elizabethans actually used it a lot in recipes like custard, because the Catholic Church used to forbid the consumption of dairy on fish days. So this was seen as a non-dairy alternative. It could also explain the lack of eggs too, which I'm really not sure for a tart how this is actually going to set without any eggs. So it tells you to put with your almond milk, fine spices and currants. Currants are pretty exciting at this point, so let's just go with that. I'm not sure what to do with fine spices, because at this point everything is all about peppercorns and cloves, which I don't think are going to go with this necessarily. Let's do some nutmeg. I'm not going to do cloves because I don't really fancy that extra crunch in with my lobster tart. So I'm going to fill it up with some of the batter. Get some lobster in there, get some currants, some lovely almond milk, a couple of little blowholes in honour of fish day. I'm not very good at art, as my teacher told me when I was 8, but let's try and see if we can do a lovely little fish. That's not the end of our story, because to this it says above the filling should be potent with sweet spices and currants. So we need more currants, more spices. The sad thing is, I know actually that even though this looked awful, I think the presentation is a lot better than the content. So this is obviously soggy pastry that bake-off would not like. It's like someone's put a really cheap air diffuser in your mouth and then shoved some very overcooked lobster in there. There is just so little that's redeemable about this. Henry VIII ate this. Honestly, this was on an actual banquet bill of fare they had for him and Catherine of Aragon. The whole reason why they did this was to get the navy up to the point where they could stand against the Spanish Armada. 15 years after this law came into being, Elizabeth I stood up and gave the rousing speech around the fact that she had the heart and stomach of a king. If the king had this kind of stomach, I don't know if that's a compliment. That's rancid, that's horrible. You know how I told you that the original pastry was called a coffin?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.